Well, I have decided to break the season-to-date review down into chunks, and today we're doing Garrett Greene, the Green Scene. And before we get to all of that, this is WVU football going deep. I am Forrest Poston. When last I checked, please subscribe, share, comment, click the thumbs up button, click the notification bell, tell your friends. And if I seem a bit more frazzled than usual, which takes some doing, Bob had a little episode today and we had to do a vet trip. But appears to just be an infection, and that we can treat. Little side effect from his earlier issues. Some of you who've been around have followed that story. So there's the update. Otherwise, he seems to be doing well. Now, Garrett Greene. Boy, there's an awful lot you can talk about. I'm going to try to figure out sort of where he stands, where he seems to be going, and some of why, maybe. Now, I'll start with the very basics. Garrett Greene, the big picture. Competitive and great leadership. Those are his essential qualities. That's who he is. Now, sometimes that does get him into a bit of trouble because he tries to do too much. If he pushes, I think the Penn State game is an example of when that happens. And, sometimes it causes more trouble than it helps. But you still want it. I mean, you want those qualities. You got to take, especially he's young. I mean, come on, he's graduating. He'll be gone after this year, but that's still, to me, he's a kid. Heck of a kid, but he's a kid. Now, very strong arm, very good, fast legs. We know these things. He's got wiggle. He's got it. Now, last year, trouble with the short game. So threw deeper passes more often. But the trouble with the short game had to be corrected. I mean, the team's not going to move forward. He's not going to move forward without fixing that. And they worked very hard on throwing the deep ball to get the receiver open so they can run after they catch. A little bit with not lowering his shoulder, and a whole lot with his footwork, being consistent with his footwork. Now, anytime you change what you've been doing, for one thing, it tends to make you think more for a while, and it just kind of tends to throw a lot of things out of balance for a while. And I do believe that's what we've seen with Greene. Now, this idea that Coach Brown has been holding him back, trying to control him, trying to turn him into a pocket passer, trying to make him what he's not, it's crap, it's nonsense, it's ignorant. I'm sorry. It's ignorant after all this time to think that. Brown has said otherwise. Greene has said otherwise. And you can see otherwise. However, Greene has had some issues pulling the trigger on the run. And I think that just kind of goes hand in hand with what he has learned, trying to up his overall game. He's got more to think about when he's back there, because as a passer, he is better able to make reads and better able to make throws. Last year, if it was a question of a short throw or run, It was a pretty easy answer because his short throws weren't that good. Running was the better answer almost every time. This year, I think the fact that he actually is better at short throws complicates the decision. I mean, it is Greene's decision to run or not run at any given time. And that was including last year. Sean Reagan made it clear that he had told Greene and Marchiol, if you see open field, run. They have that freedom. Now, the end of the Kansas game, Coach Brown simplified temporarily. And he told him 1-2, run. Basically, if it's not open early, don't keep looking, just take off. Now, it worked against Kansas, partly because Kansas was dropping a little deeper. Things were opening up. You can't do that all the time, 1-2 run, because teams adjust. But Greene did seem, even before that, to be getting better at making these more complicated decisions faster. And the two things, I mean, we've kind of backtracked to a couple of years ago when he wasn't making enough good decisions. And he has made, some of the time, he's tried to run when he shouldn't. Some of the time he's tried to pass when he shouldn't. Some of the time either one will work, and some of the time you're just screwed. But his decisions have been a little slow, and the percentage of correct decisions maybe hasn't been as good as it needs to be. I think we did see that shifting against Kansas, even before, the last 3 drives. Now, he had problems, most of which weren't on him. Had an interception. I haven't looked at it, but, Coach Brown says the defender grabbed the receiver. It may have happened before what we saw. I do mean to go back and take a look at that. Other interception, he was hit as he threw. Now that one you can say maybe he should have either decided to throw it earlier, or should have seen the guy coming and took off. But that's a kind of decision he hasn't had to make often. And this is sort of, okay, now he knows the timing a little bit better of when to run, when to stand in. And that's always what you want, a quarterback who will stand there and take the hit in order to complete the pass. But the difference between taking the hit and completing the pass and taking the hit and throwing an interception is a pretty darn narrow difference. But I do want to take a look at some numbers. Now, because one of the things last year, Greene was known, big time throws, over 10%. And that's, difficult, special, throws, usually longer throws. Now, his essentially dangerous passes, risk of turnover, 2.3% of the passes last year. Average depth of attempt was 13.5. Now, that's not, yards that you got per attempt. That's how deep did you throw, how deep was the receiver when they caught the ball. And that was 13.5 yards last year. Now, to this point in 2024, the big time throws are down to 6.7%. Passes in danger up to 5%. Average depth down to 11.6%. But against Kansas, big time throws 9.7%, so essentially the same as last year. Passes in danger down to 2.5, same as last year. Average depth 13.7, much like last year. So, Kansas, in essentially every way, pass and run, decision making, was Greene's best game this year, not counting the Albany game. I'm not counting, the season totals count Albany. Other comparisons, I'm leaving Albany out. It was a heck of a game, though. Season to date, he's 63 of 111, 57%. Better than last year, but not up to the 60% mark wanted to reach, and this counts the Albany game. Passing depth. Depth at 20%, 20 yards or more, 20.7% of his passes have been at least 20 yards. 27.9 have been 10 to 19 yards. 27.9% have been 0 to 9 yards. And behind the line of scrimmage, 13.5. On the 20-yard plus passes, he's hitting 39%. On the 10 to 19, 58%. And on the 0 to 9, 68%. On the behind the line of scrimmage, 100%. 15 or 15. So if you're looking at the short passes, he is hitting, I figured it and didn't put it on my notes. I think it's around 78%, 77%, something like that. So his passes from behind the line of scrimmage up to 9 yards is right about the same percentage that the guys considered the top quarterbacks were hitting. So he has improved the short to intermediate game. No two ways about it. That has improved. We were losing a little bit on the long game. That seems to have changed against Kansas. He was hitting those passes better. Say the 15 plus range, he was hitting very well, and he was hitting them in stride, which is why guys like Clement got such long runs after the catches. Critical. So the Kansas game does look to be a turnaround point. The short intermediate game has been better all season. The long game and the running game seem to be coming back into form. Now, if he does combine those two for the rest of the season, makes good decisions. I'm not figuring interceptions and that sort of thing here. And again, interceptions, a lot of that is just going to be cleaning up some things with the line more than anything else, and hoping we don't keep getting the same rate of hideously bad calls. Another thing to note, now, typically throwing to the left is not Greene's strength. Last season, throwing to the right was his strength. And throwing too deep to the right, he was extremely good. So far this year, and this is something the announcers mentioned in the Kansas game and had both right and wrong, which was actually a lot of things. They also were surprised when Greene ran over people and ran through tackles. Greene's been doing that for a while. Greene isn't tall. He's above average height. Not for a quarterback, but he's above average height. But he's been working with Mike Joseph for a long time now. And that body is solid. He is a good 205 pounds or so. And it is solid. When he hits people, they know it. So that should not have been a surprise to them, certainly, especially if they had watched any significant amount of film. But they said Greene was breaking his norm by throwing to the middle, and that's not entirely true. Now, short middle has been a problem, and that's partly because that's where a lot of traffic is. But 17% of his passes so far this season have been intermediate to long center. And intermediate center, he's hit 12 of 19. So he is going, to the middle, not quite 1/5 of the time. I mean, specifically intermediate middle 1/5 of the time. And he's hitting at a pretty good clip. So I'm not even sure how different that is from last year. I think a lot of people have illusions about Greene. But what we can say season to date, short game, much better. Long game, intermediate long game, been a bit of a problem, coming together. Running, making that decision has been a little bit of a problem, coming together. So would we have liked all of this to have been ready by the beginning of the season? Of course we would. But there's a price for learning things. You have to put in the work and you have to have the patience. Well, Greene put in the work, now we have to have the patience. So does he. But I do think that as he gets better at integrating all of this to being not just a complete quarterback, but a complete dual threat quarterback. And to be honest, most dual threat quarterbacks are not complete quarterbacks. They have certain weaknesses that they don't overcome. Greene has worked at and seems to be overcoming. 24/7, they had a story. I think it's behind the paywall. I won't go into much. But, they talked about some of the things that Greene needs to fix. But they said, can he? Will he? Well, if you look at the shifts and progressions, that is exactly what he's doing. He is fixing those things. Now, Coach Brown said in Monday's press conference, hey, he has no issues with Greene running, other than like all of us hoping nothing goes wrong, and especially injuries, but recognizing, hey, that's part of what he does. That's part of what helps the team. You let him do it and you kind of hold your breath. But he said, when he stays in the pocket, which of course he has to do some of the time, by choice, but when he is in the pocket, his footwork has to be better. That was one of the things they've been working on, still working on. But Greene, based on the first 4 games, is putting his game together. That could be, should be, a very, very good thing and a big worry for defenses. All right, guys, going to get out of here. Thanks for dropping in. I'm not quite sure which part of the team I will do next, hopefully tomorrow, but I will see you then. So long.